Welcome to Inspiring Possible. I'm Christy Pennison, former stuck person turned therapist and dream consultant. Are you feeling stuck, overwhelmed, uncertain, or just need a little inspiration? Then I want to help you gain the clarity, confidence, and courage to create possibilities and live a life you love. Because, folks, life's too short to be miserable. Welcome back, Inspiring Possible people. Oh my gosh, I can't believe that we are in 2026. Feels like 2025 was just yesterday, but we are in a new year, folks, and new year means new possibilities. And so, wherever you are, I hope you've been doing a little bit of dreaming up of what could be possible for you this year. I hope you're not putting too much pressure on yourself to do all the things, but to really create some space for some clarity and intention. But if you are somebody that this year you are like, Christy, I am ready to go for that next level in my career. It might be a position you're wanting to get into, or you see maybe some people in leadership and you're like, oh, I'd love to be over there. Or it could be a whole career change. I mean, the sky is the limit. But you're like, I don't know if it's possible for me to get in that type of position or to switch into that type of industry. Then you have came to the right place today, because I have a special guest with me who is on a mission to help women. And guys, if you listen, because I know there's a few of you guys out there that listen, we're never trying to exclude you in this conversation, too. So you're here to learn as well. But stop spinning their wheels and crack the leadership code, okay? And finally step into a role not only that you've maybe earned, but that you would fully want to jump into. And so I'm really excited to have Katy McFee on the show today, and we're going to talk a little bit about all of this. So, welcome, Katy.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah. Okay. So, tell me, how did you become passionate about like empowering women to be to take charge of their career journey and to really go for it?
Yeah. I'd say it's a combination of something I've always been passionate about empowering women. I remember I read Lean In like 2010. And I was like, what is this? I had never come across, a book specifically for women and specifically for women who wanted to get to leadership. And I was always, quite ambitious in my career. So I was always interested in all of that stuff, right? Like what it meant to be a woman in a male dominated space and how I could continue to advance in my career. And so I was involved in, our local lean in circles. I was also the chair of an organization, a nonprofit organization called Women Powering Technology. I mentored a lot of women. So there was always like an interest there. I never planned to do it professionally, truthfully. That was never my plan, right? It was like a side for fun thing. But then, like, in terms of my own career, I always like to tell people, like, my journey was not a straight line to the top. Far from it. And I struggled a lot with my transition from manager to director to VP. What I noticed once I finally figured some stuff out and became a VP and was successful as a VP and then became an EVP was that a lot of the women I mentored around me were getting stuck in those same spots. And by the way, men too. I've really found that this transition, like manager to director to VP, is where a lot of people get stuck. And so I became really fascinated and maybe even obsessed with understanding, why does that happen? Why is it that some people are able to break through, cross that chasm to senior leadership, and some people never do? And, the more I became interested in this, the more I wanted to pass along this knowledge to other people. And so I did end up leaving, my corporate role and starting my own business. And initially, this was just going to be a part of it. I thought, I just want to help leaders with this transition. But I would say within, I don't know, a month of launching my business and sharing, posting online and that type of thing, it became obvious to me that no, this is all I want to do. I actually don't want to serve any of these other clients. Like I really just want to help women specifically make this transition. One, because it is so hard for us, but two, because we face enough obstacles already in terms of biases that exist and systemic stuff. And I'm like, how can I help these women gain some advantage through what I've learned? So that's what took
Yeah.
me from there to where I am today.
Well, it's interesting because I was actually wrapping Christmas presents this morning at like 6 o'clock. Okay. Just to let you know. Oh, by the way, guys, I mean, I told you it was a new year, but we recorded this a little bit early. So I just gave it away. When I told you I was wrapping gifts. But, anyways, and I was actually like listening to something. I had something in the background on YouTube or whatever, some inspirational motivate. I don't know what it was, but it went and segued into a ad, and it was one of those masterclass ads. I don't know if you ever get these reels. Like, I just probably get
Mhm.
them because they know I like to learn, and I've almost, like, pushed the button and say, "Okay, yeah, I'm gonna sign up and watch some of these." But tied into our conversation, there was a guy on there, and he was talking about how how you do rise, and he said it's not typically what you think because it is different things associated with power. And there might be someone who's less skilled than you that has figured out how to make these transitions and steps and will get to these roles of, senior leadership, and it doesn't mean that they were more qualified than you.
Mhm.
That it just means that they figured out how to get to that next level with confidence and be able to break through some of those barriers like you mentioned. So it's interesting that I was just listening to that today as we are talking about this. But what were some of the things that you found out that you needed to do to break through to
Mhm.
some of those, different roles? And what were some of the barriers that you did encounter that you had to learn to navigate?
Yeah. Well, it was things I needed to do and then things I also needed to stop doing. Because
Okay.
I think a lot of us, especially as women, make this mistake where we think my value is in how helpful I can be, how much stuff I can get done, how hard I can work. Right. And oftentimes, when it comes to moving into senior leadership, it's no longer about working harder than everyone else or even being the best at your job, right? To your point with respect to the ad you just heard, oftentimes it's more about, okay, how am I demonstrating that I'm actually ready for that next level? So one of the things I needed to learn to do was to communicate the great ideas I already had. I already had great strategic ideas, but I was constantly being told I wasn't strategic enough to be a VP. And so I was so confused. Like I was like Googling what is strategic. I was like buying books because I was like, I think I'm thinking strategically, but, like, I keep being told this other thing. And what I ended up finally realizing was I did have strategic ideas. I was probably in many ways ready for the next level already, but I wasn't communicating that to the people around me. I wasn't using, like, the right language. I wasn't sharing my ideas in a way that was clear, concise, and compelling. And that was creating the perception that I was not ready, even though I
Yeah.
was. And when I think about one of the big barriers, and this can happen if you're in a situation like I was, I was at this organization for 8.5 years. And what happens is people form perceptions about you. And like it or not, those perceptions are their reality. And sometimes we can shift those perceptions. We can change our behavior, we can change our communication style. And sometimes we can't. Right. I hit a point where I was like, it does not matter what I do. This guy's never gonna see me as a VP. They're just never gonna see me as a VP here
Mhm.
because they knew me when I was a lot more junior. My CEO had also known me in my very first job I ever had. And so I was like, "I'm never gonna break this." And so I'm maybe better off going somewhere else with a fresh start and walking in as the leader I wanna be on day one. And so
Mm.
that was about getting really honest with myself and reflecting on, is it actually gonna happen for me here? And I knew, like, I knew in my gut, I was like, "It's not gonna happen for me here." And so then I had to have the courage to be like, "Okay, I'm gonna go put myself out there and see if I can go do this somewhere else." So, there was a few things that I had to change, but, one big piece was the mindset of deciding just because I'm not seen as a leader here, it doesn't mean I can't be one somewhere else. Right? Just because these
Yeah.
people may not value me as an executive, that doesn't mean other people won't. So, like, that can actually take a little bit of work to get there.
Yeah, I think it really can, and I'm glad that you're bringing this up because I'm thinking about even in my, job as, now a leader of a group, right? And we're a small group, but I'm thinking about as you're saying these things, perceptions that you form. And I can even that think about historically when I was in different roles, even of leadership, perceptions people had of me. And I do think that a lot of that initial perception, even if someone's developing about the skills or the way that they're showing up, it does linger, and it is hard to sometimes reshape those, even if someone has been taking the time themselves to figure out how to grow into those roles. Because, I mean, we all start somewhere. None of us start out like knowing anything really. I mean, we all are learning and growing. So I do think even about the skills that I've learned, I still have tons of skills I need to yet learn. And then the ones that I have been over a long period of time through this trial and fail error, but it sounds like for you, you had to realize that, am I going to change the perception of where I'm at? And if not, it doesn't mean that these people are wrong or right. It just
Yeah.
means that I need to change my environment to a place that I can walk in confidently that I have these ideas, skills, strategy, be able to communicate that, and I like how you said I was writing it down, clear, concise, and was it clarity? With clarity
Compelling.
is what you said?
Compelling.
Compelling, that's what it was. See, I was like, clear and compelling, okay. Compelling, but it's true because if you can't communicate what your vision is and you think you're communicating well and nobody understands it, then, you know, it's hard for you to rise into that leadership where you have to do that as a daily thing.
Exactly, exactly, and, it's interesting, I love the point that you made that it doesn't mean they're right or wrong because sometimes when people hear about my experience, they're like, "Oh, your boss was like a jerk. He didn't want you to get" and I'm like, "I don't think that's true at all." Like, I think that in many ways, I wasn't showing up as a VP. I'm not sure he knew exactly how to coach me to help me figure that out. I think maybe I had to go through that journey myself, or maybe he didn't know exactly how to articulate what I wasn't doing right. That's not his fault. And it's like one of those, like, 2 things can be true, right? And
Yeah.
the truth is, sometimes people you can shift their perception. Like, I've had multiple clients who've come to me frustrated, being passed over. We work together, and then they get promoted where they are, right? So, that can also happen, and it really comes down to how open is that person to seeing you in a new light. And so you gotta do the work.
Yeah.
You gotta do the work and start showing up differently, but they also have to be open to seeing you in a new light.
Yeah, let's talk about this real quick because I do know there's some listeners that are like, you know what, I feel like I'm giving it my all, but maybe
Mhm,
people haven't always given them the feedback of what may be missing.
mhm.
But let's put this key point in here that you said you had to be willing to do the work. So you didn't just say, I feel like I'm doing the status quo at my job. I should be promoted to this next level. What it sounds like to me that you did was go on this journey of self-exploration, read the books, maybe even gotten your own coaching. I don't know if you did that or not, but, like, did the process to say, "If I wanna get here, then I need to obviously do something different so that I can arrive at that place," and not just expect that if I'm gonna continue doing the same things, I should get a different result.
I knew I was working really hard. I knew I was really committed to this organization and to my team. I knew I was a good people leader. And so I was like, there's something else that's like something's not working. Like, again, a lot of it comes down to self awareness and getting really honest with ourselves. But for
Mhm.
example, I would notice I'd have a great idea and I'd come propose it at a leadership meeting. And people would be like, yeah, like, have you thought about this though? And they'd be kind of poking holes in it. And I'd leave so confused. Like, why are they not seeing how brilliant this is?
If they see the vision of what this idea
Yeah, like,
is.
this is gonna solve all our problems, guys. Like, what am I in the twilight zone? And so I had to believe because I was also able to observe that other leaders were getting their ideas across in a more effective way than I was, right?
Mhm.
And so, I started to really get curious, which by the way, I think is a superpower as a leader. It's curiosity. I always talk about two leadership superpowers, which are empathy and curiosity. But I got really curious about, okay, well, that guy said this thing and people are listening to him. Like, what language did he use? Okay, does that
Mhm.
feel good to me? Does that resonate with me? Like, maybe I want to borrow some of that language. And so over time, I also was able to adopt some phrases or some practices or things that I noticed worked for other people that I also liked. Like I was like, yeah, I kind of like the way that sounds. Like that feels good to me. I'm gonna borrow that. And I think it's important to understand, like, is this authentic to me as a leader? If it's not, don't do it, right? Because people can like
Yeah.
smell inauthenticity like a mile away. But I think it's also okay to learn from the people around you that you observe doing things that
Absolutely.
you wanna do. So, yeah, there was an element of that. I worked with an executive coach. I read a whole bunch of things. I had mentors. I was not afraid to ask for help. That's never been a problem
Yeah.
for me. I'm always like, I do not need to reinvent the wheel. Like, I'm gonna utilize people that I know. Mhm.
Well, and I think you know what you're highlighting is too is something that's worked very well for me. I mean, is the reality of asking for help. I mean, I've probably been on at least 3 or 4 calls this week alone for my own role of asking from help from different people to either help me see things differently, to help me try to figure out how to solve this problem in a different way, to give me insight into myself because I loved how you said self-awareness, but sometimes we're not aware of the things that are limiting us
Mhm.
from being able to break through to that next thing that we would wanna see for ourselves. And so sometimes that alternate perspective, or I love how you said curiosity and just leaning into that, can really make a big difference versus being on the other end of that, which would be the blame,
Yeah.
defensiveness. It's because they're not listening to me. You know what I mean? That a lot of us can very easily fall into. I'm raising both my hands right now to for those that can't see me, like, because I've been there, done that. I'll be like, oh, it's their problem if they thought differently, if they did this, or if they would have considered me for that. But sometimes it's not necessarily I'm not saying it's not a them problem, but sometimes it's an awareness of that self and being curious enough to take that ownership to say, "Well, if I wanna have something different, what can I own to move to that next place?" And I'll never forget, I had a job once, Katie, I'm sure you've had a job like this too. But, I remember there was somebody that I worked with, and it would just frustrate me to no end, and she's now, like, one of my closest friends, but she would walk into a place and people would just, like, listen to her. They would
Yeah.
listen to whatever she said. They would take her idea or feedback. And I'll never forget a time, and this was a very early learning lesson in my career, where I thought that because she could walk in with confidence and she had the respect of those around her and things like that, that I could do the same thing. And it doesn't mean that I couldn't, I just hadn't established the
Yeah.
perception that people had about her. That's the
Yeah.
reality. And I was younger, and so I was like, "I'm gonna give this feedback to my boss because this is what so and so would have done." And let me tell you, Katie, it almost got me fired. And I really thought that I was being kind and considerate, but firm and sharing my idea. And the guy literally almost fired me over the situation. But I remember I took this moment to be like, okay, first I had to take ownership that I didn't deliver things in the right way that
Yeah.
I thought was going to be received. And then I had to realize that I hadn't necessarily I don't wanna say earned, but I wasn't seen in the same light as my now friend and counterpart who had this and honestly, at her age, she had a different era of confidence where she was
Mhm.
at that point. Like, she was more confident, she could more clearly articulate what she was needing or wanting, and I hadn't learned those skills yet, and I wasn't perceived at that yet. So when I tried to do it, it just really went awry.
Oh gosh. Like, I think back about I can remember, and it's so funny because now that I'm on the other side, I can spot these things so easily. So, like, you know, lesson number 1, have people in your life who can call out your blind spots, who can spot these things. Because I
Mhm.
can even remember talking to my CEO. He didn't wanna make me a VP sales. And I was like, "Okay, what if you make me a VP sales operations?" Because I can definitely fill that role. Like, I just wanted a VP title so badly, and, like, if I were coaching me now, I'd be like, "That is not a compelling argument. That is not a good, like, you're, like,
That's
making a
not the reason you
concession,
should
like,
be going for that.
this is the worst negotiation you're, like, desperate." But at the time I was kinda desperate, but I did not have that person in my life or people to help me see my blind spots. That was why it took me so long, and because I noticed such a gap, you mentioned, like, why am I so passionate about this? Like, I noticed a gap and, like, I could not fill that gap. Like, I was like, "Who can help me?" And I didn't have any women mentors or sponsors to turn to because I had just, like, never had I'd had a woman boss for 5 months of my entire 18-year career. So I didn't have that person, and I couldn't find a book, I couldn't find a course, I didn't have 6 figures to spend on an MBA. I was like, "I don't know what to do." And the truth is, a lot of these blind spots, once you see them, are pretty easy to correct. but you just need that person in your life. And to your point, it's like if you're going down the route of like the blame game, that's just not going to help anyone. Like I often will say, like, there may be bias. Like that might actually be true. And can you control that? Like if you can't
Mhm.
control it, I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time on it. Like there's things
Yeah.
that are working against us, and also you can show up as such a superstar, you're gonna get the promotion anyways. So,
Yeah.
I love the idea of just focusing on what we can control because the other way just it may be true, it may be totally true, it may be valid, but also it's probably not serving you.
Well, and sometimes the things we can't control, we have to learn, and that's something that you learn over time too. Just like I learned in that setting, like of what I could or could
Mhm.
not do, and I learned real quickly what I should not be doing. But I've also learned in different settings where I'm not going to be able to change the system,
Yeah.
and so the system is not going to change no matter how hard I try to change it or try to influence change within it so that I can get to a certain goal. There is some times where you just have to call those external forces for what they are, immovable in the role that I'm at. So then you have to figure out, like, to your point of your early on experience of like, it's nobody's fault, but I'm realizing that there's a stuck perception about me, there's a stuck situation here, and that I can either try to keep on forcing against the grain to get to where I would like to be, and I envision myself walking into this role, or I can sometimes gracefully and graciously change where my environment is so that I can have an environment where people are noticing those blind spots maybe. Or there might be more of a I can start in with a fresh start where I can and essentially sometimes even reinvent myself. It doesn't mean that I wasn't
Yeah.
working hard over here, but I can come in and reinvent who I want to be and display that to this new group of people who don't necessarily know me when I was just getting started and learning all the things, you know?
Yeah, well, and you make I love your point when you said, "I can keep going against the grain." That actually gave me such a visual because when I was in my director level role and I was feeling stuck and I wasn't feeling valued, I wasn't showing up as a leader I wanted to be, all of the things. It felt hard. Like I felt like I was banging my head against the wall. I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing differently. And it felt hard. And when I think about when I moved into my VP role, which was a larger company, the goals were much more ambitious, much more aggressive, and it was kind of scary. Like, when I landed this role, I was like, "Okay, what have I done?" Because
You're
now
probably be like, "Oh, did I
I was like,
bite off more than I
"Wait,
can chew
I
here?"
I tricked them, and they think I can do this job." But interestingly, that job ended up feeling easier, more fun, and I was more successful. And part of it ended up being that I was in a culture and a stage of company that allowed me to play to my strengths much more than in my previous company. And this was something I wasn't even aware of. Like, I didn't know if you had said to me, "Hey, do you think you get to play to your strengths here?" I would have been like, "Yeah, I'm a sales leader. I'm a good people leader. I'm good at sales. I've got the right technical background. Sure, I do." But when I moved into this next company, which was a scaling stage company versus like an earlier startup, I was able to really lean into what I'm good at, which is like looking at data and understanding the patterns and making good calls to scale and optimize and like really pour the gas on. Okay. And so that's where I'm good. I can like knock it out of the park. Whereas in that earlier stage, I was supposed to be like coming up with strategies from nothing and like investigating these markets and being like, is it the right one? And like, it just wasn't my strong point. And so I was
Mhm.
working really freaking hard. I was trying my best, but it was like, it was painful. And I
Well, you
frankly
couldn't
was
get
like,
the
not that good.
traction from your work because it wasn't necessarily something that was really, where you were able to make that move the needle on that. Yeah.
Yeah. So some of it is also just recognizing that, like, if it feels really hard and terrible, it may not be the right thing for you.
Yeah. Listen, I learned that, like, we would never be sitting here having this conversation if there's one job I can think about, and I really learned so much. It grew me as a leader. It grew me as a people manager. I never people managed before this. But the day that I left, the thing that I remember is I was actually grateful for them for it to have so much friction that I was
Mhm.
like, this is no longer something that's the best use of my skills and talents. And it took me leaping out of that into the kind of the unknown to have a little bit of a segue into what I'm doing now. But that was what they had, that what was happening in that role was the best thing that could have happened for me to push me to a place that was more aligned. And so I think sometimes people feel this sense of loss when they are having a transition, maybe, or they're choosing to transition because there's like, man, I worked so hard for years, putting so
Yeah.
much into this. But but then when you get into that next place that where it sounded like you were able to thrive and really use your skills, your ability, you were that right person in the right seat, right? It sounds like in this maybe second stage, very growth oriented
Yeah.
company, then you were like, wow, this is what it feels like to really be able to use my strengths, talents, abilities, where people are actually empowering me in my role to just go for it. And then I'm in an environment and a culture that supports that. It makes a world of difference.
Yeah. Well, when I think about when I told my team I was leaving, like, I cried. Like, I felt
Yeah.
I first of all, I felt terrible leaving them. I felt like I was abandoning them. I had built that org from scratch, so I'd hired every person in that organization. And so, yeah, it was a really tough decision to leave.
Yeah.
Um, and but to your point, then coming into a new place and seeing how great that felt, it was 100% worth it. And even when I thought back on those 8.5 years, if you had asked me in that moment, like, could I have just been like, forget that time and just gone right up to the role I wanted? I would have been like, absolutely. But I would not have the business I have today had it not been for that period in my life because it really forced me to become kind of obsessed with like, why can I not make this happen for myself? If I had just been promoted right along and I had someone who like took me by the hand and it was easy, I would not have the business I have today because I would have never felt that pain. So I would have never wanted to solve it for other people.
Well, and I'm glad that you bring that up because, I think anything you are going through, if you are moving forward and it's a new place you've never been, or it's there is growing pains and it's going to have discomfort. And I think about all the roles we sometimes like, and with my leadership team, we'll sometimes reflect on previous roles we've had or different hard that we've had, especially in the space that we're in. And it's always those seen with like, that was hard, but it taught me so much. And if I hadn't developed some of these very nuanced skills, I wouldn't be able to do the things that I'm able to do today. And so I try to keep that in my mind even now because I'm sure like me, you probably went through this. Like there's still stages where I'm like, oh, why is this so challenging? But normally, if I can get through the other side of that challenge, the more I'm like, wow, okay, well, I learned something different about myself, about others, about how to do this leadership thing a little bit differently, about to figure out what the heck I am not doing great that I think I'm doing so great at. I can think about last year around this time, I had a conversation and I was really thinking that I'm like, oh, I'm rocking and rolling as this people manager. Woo, I got it. And then something happened, and it, like, knocked me right off my feet and, like, really brought my ego down, like, 5 notches, okay? And then I was like but it forced me then to say, "Okay, I have some blind spots that I'm not aware of, and I need to be curious about that and get help." And so
Mhm.
if I wouldn't have been in that discomfort, I wouldn't have got help, which wouldn't have prepared me to be where I'm at today. But, it's those discomforting times that's like really, really pushes you to the next level. But I get what you're saying because I cried that place that I told you that I ended up leaving. I cried. I cried at everybody. There was like 50 people sitting there. Some of them I'd
Yeah.
hired, some of them had been acquired through mergers. And I was just like, I'm so sorry I'm leaving you guys, but I got to go.
Yeah. Well, and I think whether it's discomfort because maybe we're forced with like a truth that is a blow to our ego, it doesn't feel good. Or sometimes discomfort could just be I'm in a brand new role, like, oh shoot, I actually landed this
Yeah.
big ambitious role, like they're gonna find me out. It's like the sort of the imposter syndrome discomfort. And either way, discomfort is typically a sign of growth, right? This is where we grow. And so I do think it's important to acknowledge that if you are feeling uncomfortable, often it is like where you're outside of your comfort zone for some reason. But guess what? Getting outside your comfort zone is the way that you grow. So if you can start to associate that with a positive instead of associating it with it, maybe I shouldn't be here, or maybe there's a mistake, or I don't like this, then you can like lean into it and actually get the growth that comes along with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what was the thing that helped you jump out of your career into your own business?
Yeah. Well, I think back. So I was in an EVP role at the time. I actually loved being an executive. Like I really did. I really enjoyed being a leader. Um, but I did start to notice. So I started to feel burnt out. And it really came down
How common
to
is that for people in this role? Let's talk about how is that,
it's very, very, yeah. Like when I help women get their seat at the table, a key piece that I focus on is habits and boundaries to mitigate that risk because there's a lot of
mm,
burnout. There's a lot of women leaving the workforce. It comes down to like it comes down to pressure at work and trying to do it all and then pressure at home and oftentimes being the default parent and like all of these things that are oftentimes specific to being a woman in like a high performing role. And so yeah, I would say it's too common and it could come down to often a couple different things. So one could just be like sheer overworking and not taking care of yourself, right? Like not spending any time on self-care and on relationships and on passions, the things that actually matter to you, pouring it all into work and your kids, which totally happens. The other thing could be simply a lack of alignment. And that was the case for me, where I had taken this role. I had taken roles like sort of opportunistically to climb the ladder. And I was getting further and further away from the passion that I had when I first started my career, which was I was in the biotech space and I really cared about bringing technologies to market that were going to like literally save people's lives. Like I was really interested in that. And so I was working at a tech company and I was working with like an amazing leadership team that I really liked. I really liked our CEO, but I was just no longer like the culture wasn't 100% aligned. It wasn't I really like, like super fast paced, fast moving, lots of change type companies and this wasn't that type of organization. And I wasn't feeling necessarily aligned from like a passion perspective. It was a cool product, but again, it wasn't like aligned with a mission of mine. And so I noticed that I was feeling unhappy. I was just feeling really unhappy. And as it went on, I was feeling less and less happy. And so I actually did an exercise where I was like, okay, I'm going to list out everything I do. And I'm going to put it into two columns. Does it energize me or does it drain my energy? And I just decided to do this one day because I was like, I don't know why I'm so unhappy. This doesn't make any sense. My life's perfect and I'm like miserable. And so I looked at the columns and the drains my energy column was super long. And the energizes me column were things that like we just didn't do that often. So in that column, there was things like strategy sessions. I love strategy sessions, but like we did them twice a year, right? So like I wasn't doing that every day. Um, and then in that column was also like mentoring women. I loved that. But guess what? It wasn't actually part of my job. I was doing it on the side. So I was like kind of faced with this reality of like, what does this mean for me? And it was really scary to leave my corporate career because I had put so much into it. I had worked so hard to getting to where I was. And I was constantly being told things like, you've broken the glass ceiling. Like, you're doing it for all of us. Like, this is so inspiring. And I'm like, I can't just quit. Like, and there's people in my life that frankly were not that supportive. Like, some of the women I knew that were in leadership, they were just like, you want to go be a coach? Like, have you lost your mind? And so there was a lot of things around a lot of conflicting things around me, and this is where I had to really go do some self work, right? Like I had to think about like what is my worth compared to like my title or my professional achievements and like deal with all that stuff that no one wants to say out loud, but honestly it was ego-based stuff. It was like, well, am I going to matter if I'm not an executive? That was the
Well,
fear.
after you've been doing it for so long, you form an identity around it.
Totally.
And it's like you have to shift that identity that you have put so much time, energy, effort into to kind of recreate that. And that can be really hard to be able to envision not only yourself in a different role, but to be able to let go of that season that
Yeah.
you were in and say like, I'm still carrying all the stuff I've worked for. This has all been, but I don't feel like I'm giving up. I'm just changing my role and my identity, you know? I
Yeah.
think that's hard.
Yeah, I think it's really hard. I think it's really hard. And for me, and this is again why I work with women, I always introduce a lot of these concepts to them earlier because I'm like, don't be like me and have never thought of these things till you're in your 40s. Like why am
Yeah.
I doing what I'm doing? Like, is this even what I want? Like, I'd never thought about it, right? I was just like so desperate to get to that next level and so focused and goal oriented that I never really stopped to think about like, why do I want
The
this? I
why.
never stopped to think
Yeah.
about like, who am I outside of my title, outside of my professional achievements? Like, who am I? Like, who am I as my authentic self? I was like, that stuff is woo woo. That is not, I never spent a minute
That's
on
a
it.
luxury for other people to think about, like, I
And
don't
like, I'm,
even know, that doesn't necessarily pay the bills or help me achieve,
yeah,
okay?
totally. I was like so wrapped up. I was just like, I don't have time for that stuff. And then once I actually allowed myself to think about that, it was just like I couldn't unsee it. Right? I just
Mm.
could not unsee what I had discovered. And I was like, yeah, I think I need to make some changes in my life. And I also think that like sometimes in that stage, like I had achieved a lot of what I wanted to achieve professionally, truthfully. I was like, do I want to try to hit the C suite? I wasn't sure. But I was like, I've achieved what I had always set out to. And so I thought, maybe now is the time where I want to try this totally different challenge, which is again terrifying. But through coaching, I was able to realize that sometimes those scary things, those scary but exciting things are actually, our sort of inner calling. And so I was like, I'm going to give it 6 months. And if I have no clients, I'm going to go back to work. I'm very hireable. I'll go find another job.
But
And
see, I
yeah,
love that though. Like you removed also I know that this is scary for people and not everybody. I don't recommend this for everybody. This is where it goes, know thyself, okay? Know
yeah,
thyself. But I also what I love about this story that you did that I really resonate with is even though in your mind you knew, okay, I kind of have a backup, right? You still just went all in. And I don't know about how this I mean, we know how it ended for you. You're here right now and you have a podcast and you also help women and you obviously have clients that you work with.
it's
But
all
you
worked
know,
out. Thank goodness.
it all worked out. But you know what? It is interesting, I think, when maybe we should do a study of these people that go all in and they're just like, I'm just going for it and there's gonna be no segue. We're just gonna do this. Okay.
Well, you know what? So I know
It
a
is
lot of
always
people.
interesting. I think you learn a lot about yourself in those jumps. And then you realize that even if the thing that's worst possible in your mind happens, there's another alternative route you can always go. But in our mind, when we're in it, I don't know about you, but when you're in it, you're like, before you take that leap, you just think that this is the path. This is the path I have to stay on. I've been
Yeah.
dredging this path for a while, you know? And then you realize, and then once you get off the path, you're like, what? There's a whole bunch of other paths that we could go, you know?
There are people that will do like a side hustle for sometimes years before they feel comfortable going all in. But for me, I was like, I'm in an EVP role and I have 3 kids. I was like, there's no time. Like I was like,
Yeah.
I don't like, I'm like, if you're 27 and your life is your own, I'm like, side hustle it up. Go for it, right? People are like, oh yeah, it's my 9 to 5, my 5 to 9. I'm like, my 5 to 9 is freaking packed. There's no time for me. I don't have a stay-at-home wife who's just like doing everything for me. I'm busy. And so that was just not a luxury that I had. So I had to think about like, okay, well, what could this look like for me? And I mean, I was also in a senior enough role that I had to give a fairly long runway. It's not like I was giving 2 weeks
Okay.
notice. I stayed through.
Yeah.
I gave my CEO the news in December. I didn't wrap up until the end of March because in that type of role, it's so disruptive to the organization for me to just like peace out. And so I
You have to
did come
help
up with a
yeah,
plan with him that I
provide
said,
the handoff.
yeah, yeah. And they didn't have someone else hired yet, right? They weren't planning for me to leave. And so I reduced my hours and that it gave me a little bit of time to start to think about um building the like what's this gonna look like. I didn't launch anything, obviously. I waited until I was fully done. But I was able to do some of the ideation around what is a business gonna look like. And I remember getting COVID and I was like quarantined for 10 days. And I built my website on Squarespace during that time because I was stuck in bed. I was like totally out of my mind. It was not very good. But, like so there was that like little bit of time. But yeah, to your point, I was like, I'm just gonna do this. I'm gonna go all in. It was scary, but I also had a very supportive partner as well. Like, so that I think really helped me too. He was like, we'll be okay. Like, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's true. I think it's like knowing yourself, knowing what you need, And then also being able to, again, anything is possible if you, and it sounds like you did a lot of strategic planning back in your day and probably still help people do today and strategic plan with those that you're consulting with. But it's really just creating that plan and say, okay, what's the next step next? And then, like you said, knowing what you need, knowing what your thresholds. Do I have support? Do I not
Mhm,
have support? What kind of runway do I need that if I jump off, I'm going to feel okay about this if we can just do just this bare minimum? And so I think like whenever anybody's jumping in, whether it's jumping off into their own thing or jumping into a role, knowing your capacity, knowing I'm repeating it again, but knowing yourself goes a long
yeah,
way because not because there's a thousand ways to get to the same destination. I mean, some might take longer than others, but it don't mean that you can't show up at the same place. It just may look different, but knowing what you need and what season of life I think you're in too does really dictate a lot of that.
mhm, absolutely.
Well, what's one I'm curious, I'm going to ask you two questions because I know we're getting to the end of our time, but what's one thing that you really advise women on when they're considering really pushing past that next barrier or to get to that next level? What's one thing that you feel like with all your clients that you really encourage them to do before they start working on taking that next step?
Yeah, if you're feeling stuck, I mean, I think a great place to start is I'll say 2 things. So one is to first ask yourself, am I creating sufficient visibility into the great work I'm already doing? Because oftentimes as women, we're like working so hard, we're doing everything, but we're not necessarily shouting that out to people. And so ask yourself, am I creating adequate visibility into the work that I'm doing? And you can do that. I'm a big fan of a weekly report, something you send every single week to your boss. Maybe you copy your boss's boss if that's appropriate. And I'm also a fan of a 30-day check in where you're having more strategic conversations, both about your priorities as well as about your thoughts on the business and your career goals. And having something more formal in place with your leader, I think is really important because then you can get the feedback you need and you can be having those conversations. And actually, if anybody wants a free template for that 30-day check-in, you can just go to morewomenpromoted.com/template and you can grab that because that's something I often recommend to people to start doing so that you can have those more strategic conversations. And then the second thing would be to ensure that you are getting feedback. Start with your boss, like start with your manager, and if they're giving you kind of vague, unhelpful feedback, really challenge yourself to ask specific questions. Not like, hey, do you have any feedback for me? And they'll be like, nothing I can think of. Okay, great. That's not a productive conversation. So then let's say you say that and they say nothing I can think of. Then you might say, okay, great. As you know, I'm working towards that senior director role, or I'm working towards that VP role, or whatever it might be. Does this mean that I'm on track for that promotion by the end of the year? And if not, what do you want to see me working on? So again, like you can see the difference in that type of question.
Yeah,
Got
I
any
love that.
feedback from something very specific and direct? Then you're more likely to get the truth. Like what's really going on. It's like, oh,
Mhm.
well, actually, we need you to be doing more of this type of thing. So challenge yourself. Like, don't blame your boss for not giving you good feedback. Ask those very specific, direct questions to get real feedback. And if you're not getting it, that's where you start to look outside. Can I find a mentor? Can I find a course? Can I find someone who's going to help me? I'm like, don't just leave your career in your boss's hands. If they're not helping you actively manage your career progression, you could feel sad about that, or you could just go find somebody else who's going to help you.
Yeah, I love that. And I think what, I just love what you're saying because I think about as somebody who's leading an organization, if somebody came to me with this, one of my direct reports, I would be like, "Amazing." I will
Yeah.
let it down. But you're right. It has to be specific enough because it's just vague that it doesn't help the leader really direct their feedback to you. But if you see somebody taking ownership of that, of course, we're not a corporate environment, but I'm sure even in those corporate settings, then it does really show that person that you're very interested. And then if they're not receptive to that over the time that you're taking accountability, ownership, making changes, then it's really going to gauge whether there is a growth trajectory for you at this place or is there
Exactly.
another place that you need to reconsider, being able to be in positions where you can grow. Well, okay. Well, look, I know I could talk forever with you, Katie, and we could probably go on, but to be respectful of your time, I do have a question I like to ask all my guests. And this may be so we were asking what piece of advice would you give women? My curiosity is what one piece of advice would you have given yourself? Maybe when you started in your career, if you could go back to younger Katie, what's something that you
Mhm.
would want her to know now?
I think I'd want her to know, like, you can do whatever you wanna do. Maybe, like, you're good enough just as you are. 'Cause I mentioned to you actually before we started recording that I have ADHD. I wasn't diagnosed until my 40s, and as a result of that, I grew up and I spent a lot of my life, like, really being hard on myself about things that were potentially out of my control, right? Like, don't have great executive functioning. I might be running late. I might, all of these things that I kind of felt like a hot mess a lot. And I really beat myself up for that. And so I would go back and I'd be like, you're good. Like you're great just the way you are and you're not a hot mess, right? Like you're able to achieve whatever it is you want to achieve. So that's what I would go tell her.
Yeah, I love that. It is so crazy about the messages that we receive sometimes from other people or even the ones we give ourselves about ourselves. And it's kinda sucks sometimes. So if you're younger listening to this podcast, kinda sucks that it takes us
Yeah.
sometimes this long to arrive.
Oh, give yourself
Maybe
some love
people are
now.
still like yeah, but I mean, it is true. It's like, you're unique just as you are, and it
Mhm.
doesn't mean that there's things that we all can grow and learn from, but we are enough, and I think that's something that we all need a reminder at, from time to time. So, okay, Katie, well, if people are like, "Man, I wanna connect with Katie," I know you told them where they could get kind of that worksheet, but if they're like, "I maybe need your help," or, "Maybe I just wanna be able to listen to podcasts that you have," tell people where they can kinda find and connect with you at.
Yeah, so I post on LinkedIn every day. That's often the best place to check out content from me. I post a lot of like tips and learnings and lessons and things, so you can check that out. Or Instagram if that's more of your jam. I do post on Instagram as well. And I have the More Women Promoted podcast. So if you like this type of stuff, the podcast is like very actionable tangible advice for getting ahead in your career, being valued for what you do, like all of that, and being a woman in leadership. So I recommend checking that out.
Okay, awesome, and we'll make sure to link that all up. Well, Katie, I'm really appreciative of you for, not only, this is one thing I appreciate about a lot of our guests, but really for you too, is not only did you figure out how do I find my way to where I want to be in my career, but then you didn't stop there. You actually were like, okay, now let me help empower other women to
Mhm.
learn what I've learned to help them get to the places that they wanna be, and so, I just wanna acknowledge you for that, and I appreciate you coming and sharing your wisdom and all the things with our audience today, and if you're listening, guys, and you feel like you're spinning your wheels and that you really have aspirations of ways that you wanna use your skills and gifts and abilities in this new year, and you're just like, "I just don't know where to go next," just remember that you are enough, and if you stay curious, the sky is the limit. Until next time. That's all for today on Inspiring Possible. If you found a little inspiration today, please go on over to iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you tune in to listen to leave us a comment and rate us. Also, make sure and link up with me at inspiringpossible.com to get the free Dream It, Write It, Do It workbook. And don't forget to follow us on social media and share this with anyone who needs to be inspired. Remember, if you can believe it, it's possible.